Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning or good evening, depending on where you are. Just as everybody starts to filter into the Zoom room, if you are here and you can hear me, pop a little message in chat so I've got some confidence that I've got some people joining me this afternoon. I can see people filling in. Excellent. Hi, Justine. Nice to see you. Hi, Esther. Hi, Stephen. Brilliant. Okay, well, at least I know that there's a couple of you here. Brilliant. Lovely to see you. So many of you know me already. My name's Sarah Janes and I am MD at Layer 8. And I'm joined by a couple of very important ladies today. First of all, my colleague Leanne, who is going to be monitoring the chat and also taking questions, etc. So if you've got anything that you need to find out along the way, please pop them into chat. And also, you can see on the screen Marilise de Villiers. I'm sure many of you know Marilise. Marilise, if you could introduce yourself to everyone, please.
Hi everybody. Hello, Marilise de Villiers. Nice to see so many familiar names pop up. I can't see your faces at the moment, but yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, so I am the founder and CEO of Marilise de Villiers Basson Consulting, and I have had my business for about 3 years. I'm a mindset and performance coach, an author, and I'm also a cybersecurity awareness and culture leader. So I have worked for the last 10 years pretty much in this space, immersed in this space. And I think I've known Sarah for about 10 years now, and we finally get the opportunity to collaborate. So I'm really excited to be here with you, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're very lucky to have you. And I'm going to ask you a bit of an odd question now, but could you tell us one strength, one thing that you really value about yourself that's helped you achieve all your successes?
Yeah, so I've always prided myself to be very creative, and despite working in a sort of consulting, very corporate environment, I've always been the creative one that thinks outside the box, that loves sort of pulling materials together, you know, and also connecting the dots. I'm very, very obsessed with connecting the dots, and I think that's why I do so much of my work in the cybersecurity and the sort of strategy space, because I'm just absolutely obsessed with connecting dots and making sure we've got the big picture.
Super important, thank you. So thank you for joining us, everybody, on our second Security Champions focused masterclass. And we are going to be looking today at making the business case. So we are going to be spending the bulk of our time on finding the why for our Champions programme. We're going to be talking you through a method that is perhaps quite different to how a traditional business case or vision is formed, through lots of conversations. We'll then turn our attention to creating a short, impactful pitch, and then finally, how we can estimate our resource and budget requirements. All of the examples that we'll talk you through are ones that we have used and anonymized with real businesses. So from a program that we've done recently at a large UK food retailer, also in the telecoms and energy sector and financial sector. So we've changed some details a little bit for obvious reasons, but I think it's important to say this is theoretical, but also trialed and tested, and we've made the mistakes and sort of gone through the process. So we're really pleased to share our findings with you today. So starting with how we find the why for our Champions programs. Now, for anybody that joined us on the last webinar, we finished by asking you to spend some time imagining what the future might look like. And we're actually going to start today's webinar doing the same. So if you weren't on the last one, no worries. We're just going to recover that exercise very briefly. So if you just pause for a moment, close your eyes or look up at the ceiling, a blank wall behind you, and imagine that you have had the luxury of going away for a bit of time, a significant amount of time. And when you come back, things have changed. Everything that you ever wanted to do with your Champions programs, all the outcomes and the reasons why you wanted it have been done. They've been achieved. And as you log on your first day back, as you walk into the office, if we're back in the office then, what do you see people doing that's different to now? What do you hear people doing that shows you it's different to what's happening at the moment. So if you just pause for a moment and write down some of your thoughts about that, you may like to pop a few into chat and share your inspirations with the rest of us on the call. And as we're doing that, I'm just going to ask Marilise, you've worked at some pretty big organisations running Champions programmes. What were some of the visions and inspirations that you had for your Champions programmes?
Right, so it would start with the program overall. So it's really about the change program, the behavior change program. And I think my vision would be, before I go away for 3 years, to say that within the next 3 to 5 years, we want to embed secure mindsets and habits into the culture of our organization. So we want it in our DNA. We want people to live and breathe security, cybersecurity, and we want it to be part and parcel of the way we do things around here. So that would be my vision to start off with. So if I then fast forward 3 years coming back, I would like to think that's exactly what happened. So instead of it taking 5 years, it took 3 years, because we've actually set up a very, very successful Champions program. And the Champions really became the catalyst for the change, and they really facilitated the change. And we've really, really focused on making it unique for each particular business function.
Fantastic. And we've got something here from David. Be nice to hear champions talking openly about security with others, things they've experienced at home, with their personal email, with their children, the steps they've taken on social media to protect themselves and their children. Brilliant. Thank you, David. Completely agree. Yeah, security being an open dialogue in the business, some real inspiring things there. So thank you for sharing. And these are brilliant, but at the moment they're still our ideas, aren't they? I don't know about you, but I've often been in a situation where I've come up with something, I think it's amazing, I've spoken to a couple of people around me, and then I go and pitch it, and all of a sudden I get that face, the one where they haven't got me, and you feel yourself constantly having to persuade them or cajole them around to your way of thinking. And that's one of the reasons that the best visions that we can create, the best business cases, are the ones that are socially constructed. And what I mean by socially constructed, I use this term a lot because everything that we run around Champions, we use this principle around socially constructed change. And what we mean is, everything that we learn, everything that we do that really sinks and seeps into our behaviours comes from our interactions, from the questions that we ask, from the conversations that we ask. And that's why talking to people is so important, isn't it, Marilise?
Yeah, absolutely. And really also understanding the psychology behind what drives change, what drives behavior change. And that's why we wanted to sort of share this slide, because at the end of the day, we are complex beings, and our behaviors are driven by 3 systems essentially in our brain, the memory systems of the brain. So if you sort of look from the left to the right, we have knowledge. So we call it typically awareness in our world, but that's typically aimed at the thinking brain, so the neocortex. And it's all about understanding the theory, becoming aware of something. So it's essentially knowledge, it's theoretical. The moment you then combine that with experience, you embody that. So it becomes more of an emotion and a feeling. So then you have the limbic system, the feeling brain, which sort of works with the thinking brain. And that's really where change begins to happen. And then we know that behavior change takes, there's lots of research, but anything between 21 and 66 days. I would argue some trickier habits would take up to 12 months. I think 9 months is a good ballpark for a big change. But the point I'm making is you've got to repeat that behavior over and over and over again in order for it to become a habit. So in order for it to be then becoming part of your being, which is the third part of the brain, the cerebellum, and it's called the being brain, but it's all about over years and years and years and years accumulated knowledge and experiences that's creating our makeup, our being, and that's where we have to really acknowledge that people will come with all sorts of different backgrounds and perspectives to the table, and just appreciating that is so important. And then to also recognize that about 95% then becomes subconscious. So once it becomes a habit, it's innate in your being, then you have to recognize that that's part of your subconscious brain. And if we're not careful, then our subconscious brain is going to run the show. So we have to become very aware, consciously aware of what's going on below the surface, if you like. So 5% of what we think about every day is just the tip of the iceberg. So being aware of those positive and negative associations that you've made over years and years and years, that has actually made your habits and behaviors, is really important. And I think we have to really, in our world, in the cybersecurity world, really start beginning to appreciate these concepts more and more. So really tap into the psychology, because that is going to be fundamental. This understanding is going to be fundamental in terms of driving the change.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And it's something that we talk about a lot is, taking time to build relationships with people before you dive headfirst into a task. I mean, we're security people. We want to get tasks, we're task driven, task focused, but actually taking the time to build a relationship and understand people that you need for your program is vitally important. We touched, actually we didn't touch, you went into a lot of detail on our last webinar about how you can apply socially constructed change and some of the principles. I'm not going to go through those again today. One of them was around building strengths though, which is why I asked Marilise about one of her key strengths, because when we talk about what's going well and what people are really good at, we get more and more of it. So if you want to have a look at those principles in more detail, then the previous webinar is recorded. It's on our Layer 8 Ltd YouTube channel. You can find it there. So go and have a watch. Now we're going to talk you through a method that you can use to socially construct your vision, socially construct your why. And essentially, it falls into three key areas: finding out what the business challenge is, then applying the security perspective to the business challenge, and then looking at how security champions would work as a solution to that business challenge. And as we talk through, we're going to use a real business, again, changed some details, changed some of the information, so that you can get a real feel for how this business went about their challenge, and how you could perhaps look at some of it for applying it for your organisation. So we're going to pause at the end of each section, give you an opportunity to answer those questions for yourself. We won't get you to share them for obvious reasons. So the case study that we'll talk you through now is with a mid-size enterprise technology business. They are currently working very, very fast to deliver new technology to the market, and they've got a global workforce that are currently all working from home. So first of all, we are going to look at the business challenge that we worked through in this case study. And what was really important was to go quite deep and find a challenge that really resonated with every part of the business. You could talk to somebody in the marketing team and it would mean something to them, or somebody in the security team and it meant something to them as well. So Marilise, for our case study, can you tell us a little bit about the result of the conversations and some of the challenges that we identified?
So really, as you've sort of pointed, this is a fast-paced environment, and everybody's kind of working from home. There's a sort of, everybody's working longer and harder than ever before, and it's really about providing technology to businesses that need to stay afloat, and it's about innovation, all about innovation and winning or beating the competition. So at the end of the day, everybody's just working harder and smarter, hopefully, in order to beat the competition.
And presumably that occupies everybody daily, but did we find a particular team or function that experienced it more? You know, was the pain felt harder in certain areas of the business?
I mean, because we're creating technology, the DevOps team obviously had a lot of demand on their time, and obviously pressures, especially with the quick turnaround times. So I would say sales, and then DevOps, and then sales as well, because you know, we've got to sell the product, and we've got to, you know, look after the demand for the products. So yeah, DevOps and sales. Obviously everybody, but those were the two sort of functions that we prioritized.
Yeah, they're really feeling it at the moment. So if we focus now down into the sales and the DevOps departments briefly, tell us a little bit about those departments. You know, what are they trying to achieve as their core goals and aims for the business?
So really it's about products that are fit for purpose, but recognizing that there's an agile development cycle. We've got to get it to market. We know it's not going to be perfect, but we've got to iterate really, really quickly. So very short timescales. Obviously, we've got to embed the feedback and incorporate the feedback. And it's all about keeping up with the sales demand.
Yeah, I can probably see and feel already those of us in security thinking about all the vulnerabilities that this poses, but hold fire, we'll have the opportunity to pull those in a moment. So how does that challenge of having to provide things that are fit for purpose, but in really reduced timescales, what impact is that having on the business?
I mean, it comes back to the people and being really, really stretched and really tired. So obviously we know if you're under pressure, when you're tired, you know, the decisions that you make aren't always the best decisions. So very, very quick turnaround in terms of decision making. Everything's new, so new processes. So it just creates a very, very challenging backdrop for people to sort of navigate. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to just pause now for a minute. And what I'd like you to do is just take a little bit of time. I know a minute's not enough to write the whole thing, but just pause a little bit and think about how would I answer this question from the perspective of my business? So I'm going to give you a minute starting now. Off you go. You've got 10 seconds. Okay, let's continue. I hope you've got the seeds of some good thoughts there. We're going to start to look now at the security perspective. We're not going to go through question by question as we did on the previous slide, but just identify here, we've got a set of questions here that you might like to ask. But the real challenges here, the real piece of information that we're trying to elicit is how can security support the business to achieve those challenges that you identified, rather than thinking about all of the vulnerabilities and all of the things we might want to do in security. We want to flip it. We want to ask ourselves, is there something that we can really pinpoint very strongly that's going to help the business to get products to market that are fit for purpose? So Marilise, could you give us just an example of what we found in this example business about how they applied the security perspective?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, this probably won't be news to many of you, and you've kind of alluded to it earlier, Sarah, because, you know, we might have some flaws, security flaws, but we don't want to, as you say, we don't want to position it like that. We don't want to sort of be negative. So I think it comes back to positioning it as we want the best for our customers, so that having that customer lens on everything the whole time, which is what is the key driver here. And what could really happen here is, or what did happen here, is that products that were not fit for purpose were reaching the markets. And rebates, you know, so it's important there to raise the awareness of, you know, that any sort of these challenges in the business will impact the business negatively. So it's flipping it and to show the different approach. But I think if we always keep the customer at the heart of our conversations, then we can show how sort of the flaws might have a detrimental impact on the products going to markets.
Yeah, and you know, that's really tangible as well, isn't it? Unfit for purpose products, that's something that, you know, we can really help with. So then pulling that together into the third area, you know, how can we use champions as a solution? You'll probably notice that in all the questions so far, we haven't even mentioned the word security champion. You know, traditionally a business case might be titled "Why We Need Security Champions." This is really about flipping it and starting off with a business challenge and then saying, is there a way that champions can support this? Even in some of these questions, we're asking things like, how can the provision of a person in every function to support proactive, secure behaviours help the business find a solution to this challenge? So we're still not really laying it on the line that we want to do security champions at this point. Marilise, again, could I just ask you to connect the dots, as you said that you do right at the beginning, and talk about how security champions were used as a solution in this business?
So we talked about the DevOps and the sales teams, and this is really where the security champions helped to facilitate the change. So this is about, again, as I said earlier, it's not about ticking a box in terms of awareness and slapping them over the head with knowledge. It's about actually being there, rolling your sleeves up, having the conversations and facilitating the change.
Perfect, thank you. And I think, you know, facilitating is such a strong word, isn't it? So I just realised that I didn't pause on the previous slide to give you a minute to have a look at that. So I'm going to flick back to the previous slide and let you have a look at the questions there. And then halfway through the minute, I'll flick to this slide. But yes, if I could just ask you again to reflect on the security perspective and security champions as a solution for your particular business context, just for a moment, just for a minute, and then we'll carry on. So again, minute starts now. Okay, I'm going to go to champions. Okay, and 3, 2, 1, back in the room. There we go. Wouldn't it be that lovely if it was that simple to create our business case? Appreciate a little more time needed. So we have the business challenge plus the security perspective plus champions as a solution that really help us start to create that why. They start to help us flick and shift the perspective from what we want to achieve in security to really connecting it to what the business is striving to achieve. But at the moment, it's still our perspective on the situation. And the next thing we need to do, the thing that takes the time and is really important that we get right, is making that socially constructed. So getting lots of different people's perspectives, ideas, talking to your colleagues and finding out how they would answer those questions that you just had a quick go at answering yourself. So as well as your perspective, you're probably going to want to get the perspective of your team. I think having people in your security department that have got your back is really strong. And I think there's a really important point to say at this stage. is obviously as you start to ask these questions of other people, you're going to get some quite different answers. And some of them might be very, very different to the way that you've just answered the questions. And it can feel a bit like, that's not what I wanted. But just remember the richness and the quality of listening to all of those different people. It may not feel exactly like your vision at the end of it, but the richness of it, the quality of all of those different things coming together will give you something that can really connect the business to your challenge. So yourself, your security team, your functional representatives, and it's important to look senior, but also to remember the people who sit in those middle management and operational roles. Often they are the people who are doing stuff. They're the people that can make change happen within the business because they control the processes. And HR business partners are very vital as well, Marilise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just jump in here for a moment. So I always say that HR are the custodians of culture. And if we are setting out to drive a cultural change in the organization, so as I said earlier, our vision is to embed secure mindsets and habits into the culture of the organization overall, because that's typically what the brief is. So we go beyond the awareness and we embed secure behaviors. We've got to work with HR and we've got to bring HR on board, and they actually are absolutely integral in driving the change. So we have to think about how we engage with them and how we actually win their hearts and minds, so we have to think about their language, and we have to become that bridge, between security and HR to be able to really help them understand the importance of what we're trying to do, and also to see how it fits into the organization's initiatives overall. So HR is an absolute fundamental party, and from personal experience, it's been a challenging relationship to develop. It hasn't always been straightforward because HR and comms, they'll come from the perspective that you are just one of many initiatives in the organization. So why would we focus on you, and why would we prioritize your work? But it's a case again of connecting the dots and showing to them how we are trying to achieve something that's really strategic and something that's really holistic. And that's again my passion and obsession with connecting the dots, is to say, let's not do a separate initiative. Let's see how we can integrate what we do into existing initiatives as well.
Absolutely, strength in numbers. And Stephen, thank you. I have seen your question in chat, and yes, we do cover it quite briefly towards the end, but we can go into it in more detail. Thank you. So, a quick little activity. Again, I'm just going to ask you to have a think about who are the first 3 people that you perhaps want to speak to, and ask some of these questions down. And as you're thinking about those people, we would encourage you to think about the quality of relations you hold with those people. The more influential they are, the more momentum you may get. But do you have a good relationship with those people already, Marilise?
Yeah, so it is about checking, who are the 3 people that you've put on that list, and it can't just be the people that you like and that you've got good relationships with. It has to be the people that can help make the decisions, influence the change, move the needle forwards in terms of your champions programs. So just honestly review the list, the 3 people that you've selected, and if it's a new relationship or if it's a difficult relationship, you might want to think about bringing in a colleague to help you have the conversation. It is all about, socially constructed change, as Sarah said, is all about collaboration, and it's all about helping each other. And so just reflect on the strength of your relationships and consider whether you need to involve a colleague to help you with the conversation.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, So the questions that we went through are really examples, and you may need to tweak that question set to be relevant to the people you're speaking to be relevant to the audience, those 3 people and beyond. And as the good old man himself, Einstein, says, there's always a good quote that you can use from Einstein, isn't there? But he says about, if he had an hour to solve a problem, the first 55 minutes would be taken up with finding the right question, because when you ask the right question, then you can solve the solution in 5 minutes. And it is really, really poignant. If we can ask good questions, we can engage people, we can build relationships with people. So I'm not going to go through it here, but we do have a resource that you can download free, obviously, on our website about how you can create good socially constructed questions. So go and have a quick look. So now we move on to creating our 5-minute pitch, and we have spent the bulk of the time talking about the conversations and the questions that you can ask people to get that that perspective from a wide variety of people. And that should be the case, that should be the piece that takes the most amount of time. Because over that time, you have got some amazingly rich pieces of information. And actually, you have already been pitching, but in a slightly different way to normal. So you've been pitching just through the fact that you've been asking people questions. You've been pitching just through the fact that you've been making relationships with these people. So by the time you start to pull your pitch together, you're probably way further along the line than you perhaps think on a traditional timeline. So, of course, you'll need to refine all of those conversations. If you've had tens or more conversations, there may not be, people will have said a lot of different things over that time. And I would encourage you not to sort of do a tally chart and say, well, this particular business issue was brought up 20 times, but this one was only brought up twice. So clearly this one is more important. I'd really encourage you to have a look at any areas that are discussed that really are life-giving forces to the organisations, or points where your organisation has achieved something really exceptional, above and beyond the norm. Because when we identify those types of things, things that people do above and beyond the job description, they are inspired from the core of their personality, the core of their being, to want to achieve them, rather than just because somebody's told them to do it. So they're the key things to look out for when you're refining your list. It's also useful to find ideas of what the business wants to become, as opposed to what you want to stop the business being. Remember, your senior leadership team have probably spent hours in the boardroom or in their own heads thinking about what the strategy for the business can be. And if they can see a real clear alignment between what you're talking about and how it can help them achieve that strategic vision, that's only going to be a win for them. And of course, because we're talking about doing this in a socially constructed way, don't lock yourself away, get some people involved to help you refine that list, get as many perspectives as is viable to do that.
Yes, so just picking up on choosing the right medium, and I cannot stress enough how important it is that you have to focus on, you are the messenger, right? You are the person that are pitching to whoever your audience is. And how often do we hide behind the medium that we choose? So I want to just kind of make that really clear, that when you have the conversations, you've also got to really think about already from the beginning, when you've extracted those themes, how might you deliver this message, and almost rehearsing that earlier on in the process. Because what often happens is we wait until the last minute to actually prepare our presentation and get our thoughts together. So I'd really encourage you to get into the habit of almost, rehearsing as you start pulling those themes together. And then the medium obviously will have to be around how you who are you speaking to, who are you delivering or pitching this to. So what are your audience's preferences? You know, are they auditory, are they visual? You know, do they need a short board paper, or do they need a few slides? But it's that's your visual aid. You've got to still be absolutely showing up with conviction to deliver your messages, right? So just some food for thoughts there in terms of how you could deliver it. You know, you might want to do an infographic, bullet points might work well. You might even want to jump on a video and do a quick video just to sort of bring it to life. You know, some of the more braver ones out there, because the video is quite petrifying for most people. But it's a case of just really, again, thinking about how you bring this to life and putting yourself and whoever is supporting you to deliver the message at the heart of it. Because this is about, again, it's about socially constructed change. So this is about you bringing the human to the table, you as the individual and your colleagues to the table. And as Sarah said earlier, you know, by the time you're pitching this, you should already have the buy-in because you've had all those conversations already. So it should just be a formality. So think about that. Think about what happens outside of the, you know, let's say so-called boardroom, because you might, you know, need to go into the boardroom, but you might not. But think about how you can influence outside of that and the conversations that you have.
Thank you. I really love that point about remember that you are the conveyor of the message. We can get really hung up on what it looks like. And of course, those things are important, but people buy into people, don't they? Yeah, not absolutely. A PowerPoint presentation or a piece of text.
Absolutely, yeah.
So here's a kind of my Blue Peter moment. Here's one we prepared earlier. This is a quick written version of what a pitch could look like using the case study that we went through earlier in our questions. We'll send slides through, so you don't need to sort of screenshot this or do anything at 100 miles an hour to write it down. But there's an example if you wanted to use this as an example of putting something like this together. Then we will send that through. Okay, we are going to start to have a look at resource and budget now. And of course, we've spent, as I said, the bulk of the time on the conversations piece. And there is a reason for that. We would always encourage, you know, when you write a business case, often the things that we are thinking about is how much time is this going to take? How much is it going to cost me? But actually, there's no point in doing any of that if it falls flat because we haven't inspired people or captured our audience's attention in the first place. So when we were presenting this 5-minute pitch, we would always encourage people to stop before they get to the detail and then basically say to people, do you want to know more? You know, encourage them. If they're inspired, they will come to you and say, okay, you could have something here. How much is this going to cost us? What are we going to do? How are we going to apply it? So again, for the how, I'm going to ask you just to refer back to the previous webinar. We went through a lot, a step-by-step of how you would induct people into a champions program there. But in terms of resourcing and budget, first of all, I would encourage you to think about some of these areas. First of all, are you going to pilot this or are you going to go big bang to the whole of the business at once? So if you've got a particular part of the business like sales or DevOps in the example that we gave you, that could be a fantastic place just to get a couple of people on board. It's not going to cost a lot, but it could prove some really, really good outcomes for the business. Also, who your champions might be. We know that already lots of the organisations we work with talk to people quite regularly, and they often say to me, well, I already know this person and that person. I'm just going to have a conversation with them and see whether they may like to be the first security champions involved in this process. And if that's the case, that's a fantastic way to start. If not, do we need to consider a more detailed recruitment programme? We also need to have a bit of an eye on how many champions we may need. You know, if you're looking for the outcome that every single employee has a champion that they can speak to, that they know, then you may be looking in a small organisation, a 1:50 ratio. But of course, in larger organisations, you're probably talking about one champion to probably 100 employees, or even up to 250 or 500 in very, very large organisations. So in terms of how much this may cost and how much resource needs to be put in, we've pulled this together through the Champions programs that we've done to give an idea of what this might look like in the 3 phases of Champions programs that we usually recognise and run. A recruitment phase, which is usually between 1 month and 3 months. An induction phase where we're bringing people up to speed, which is usually around 3 to 6 months. And then of course your ongoing maintenance program. And we've looked here about, you know, what a champion would need to do themselves and what you and the security team would need to do as well. So if you look at recruitment isn't too onerous on the champion. They just need to really have the opportunity to be engaged and inspired by what you are providing them, be that through a conversation, through running through the pitch with them, or maybe that's through a more social campaign or going through your normal internal comms channels. The induction phase is quite a big piece because as you probably have realized by now, even if you didn't come to the last webinar, we really advocate that instead of on day 1 champions turning up and being given, oh hello champion volunteer, here's your job description, and then thinking, oh my goodness me, you know, I've got so much to do in my day job, I really can't commit the time. We really encourage that the champions and security collaborate together to establish what their role looks like and what some of the key projects and challenges that they may look like over the first 12 months are. So again, that previous webinar goes into a lot of detail about the types of activities you might want to do with champions in that induction phase. I can see questions going, so I'm going to come into the questions in a second. So we need to think here in terms of how much activity it will take, how much time it will take for champions to attend workshops, to look at the materials, and whether that would be we used to always run face-to-face workshops. Now we have to split them down into shorter modules so that people aren't online all day. And of course, from the perspective of the security team, who's going to create the workshops, how are you going to engage with the champions, how are you going to really solidly review the outputs from those workshops so you can truly socially construct the way forward. Then if we look at the maintenance phase, and I'll touch on your question, Stephen, about how we can really engage and maintain champions' commitment when they're perhaps doing lots of other jobs at the same time. We look at a number of things. First of all, because the champions have been engaged in putting the projects together in this induction phase and really building the role, it's not like somebody's just told them to do something. This is something that's come from their core strengths, their core values. It's something they have laid their name on the line to say, I want to get involved in this and I want to be part of it. So that helps. The other thing is that the work that security is doing is really about maintaining an environment for the champions where they can help them with their career prospects. So the way that we would do that is not just say, you're a champion, we want to teach you about how to recognize phishing emails, we want to teach you about how to recognize ransomware. We also want to say, you're going to need some other skills to be a successful champion, like negotiating with leadership, like managing projects, like communication or presentation skills. So at the same time as developing skills in security will be helping you develop those business skills, and not only helping you develop those business skills, but giving you the opportunity to become visible and influential at a senior level within your functional areas or across the business, maybe providing competitions. So there should be a win-win situation for the champions. You know, they're in it because they want to be, and they're seeing the fact that they are supporting the business and they're supporting themselves and their career development. So as you go through, it's really important to consider who is going to be doing this in the security team. Some organisations, if they've got a very large champions programme, do recruit a full-time employee. Some organisations do work with external providers. Some organisations have a large awareness team and they feel that they can manage it within their existing security awareness team, but it does need time, attention and focus. Okay, I'm just having a quick look at the questions, but I think Marilise has answered a few of those.
So there's a question from Richard. We're thinking of seconding champions to information security team at 20% of time over 3 months to get a better understanding of how security fits in the organization. What are your thoughts on this as an approach? So it's 20% of their time over 3 months to get a better understanding of how security fits in the organization.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. And I guess one of the things that I would ask you to think about, you perhaps already have, but is how are you going to position that with the functional management within the team? They are perhaps going to see that as a knock to the amount of time that they have with their employees. Suddenly you're sort of asking them to reduce from 100% of an FTE to 80%. So I think really understanding the needs of the functional managers. So when you're talking about that, you can you can make sure that they have the support from their line management chain to give that percentage of their time over to security. On the flip side, I think it is fantastic because what champions really need is some dedicated time. It can be very challenging, you know, even if they're in it for all of the right reasons, when you've got somebody, you know, when you've got people bearing down on you and saying, sorry, my work comes first. So if you are able to formalize that, it's fantastic.
And again, I think selling the benefits of that 20% in terms of how it will help them in their day-to-day, because it's not just going to be a standalone, I'm connecting dots again, but this is not just about 20%, which is just an ad hoc thing. It's about the 20%, what they'll bring back after the 3 months will be rich experience that they can apply in their day-to-day roles. So it's about how we position it, how we sell it as a business benefit. So I'll constantly think about as Sarah say, how will the functional managers kind of agree to this? There will be a business benefit for them, you know. And as Sarah said, you know, we're not just talking about security champions doing the techie stuff. We're actually talking about them developing their communication skills and their negotiation skills and having difficult conversations, you know. And I think that alone, in terms of the professional skills that you develop as a result of this socially constructed change and the methodology, is so valuable across the piece, so valuable. Sarah, so Stephen is just saying he's wondering if a big selling point for champions and staff would be to focus on their own personal digital identities. And, you know, obviously a lot of organizations, I think that's right, have focused on security starts at home for a few years now. But you haven't really had the champions, or in your case, Stephen, you haven't had the champions in place to really promote that. So, you know, just wondering about that.
That's a fantastic draw for a lot of champions, because because you're starting with something that, that they can understand, and you're starting with something that has real value to them. Mary's always says, and we talk about this a lot, you know, security is now becoming a life skill. It's not just something actually that you need to learn if you're a security consultant or part of the security department. It's actually something that is a life skill. And, you know, I bet 10 years ago when you went out to a pub or a restaurant, when we do go out to pubs and restaurants again, I should say, but I bet 10 years ago, you know, people kind of said to you, oh, I don't really understand what you do. And I know now my friends and colleagues are always asking me about GDPR. They've seen the latest hack or scam, etc. And they're insatiable for that information and want to know more. So I think using that as a draw is a great way to get people into the program.
Yeah, and I have worked in a couple of organizations now where we've done the digital footprint, and as an incentive for people to, and it's a very eye-opening exercise when you actually suddenly realize, you know, when someone's actually done your digital footprint, and you can see, I mean, typically it's done with board members or executives, but it's so powerful if you can help these champions, use that as a carrot to get them on board and to see their own digital identity and the risks that are being presented due to their sort of footprint on social media, etc., etc.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for your questions so far. There's probably time for a few more, so if you think of any, pop them in. So quick little activity now. Right at the beginning of the session, I said, think of a vision, think of something that you would like to see happening with your Champions program in the future. Now, again, grab your pen, and I'd like you to go back up to your notes and just put a date on that. Make it challenging, not 10 years, 20 years, but when would you like to see that becoming a reality? People doing and saying those things as a result of your Champions program. And then just go down a little bit further, and you should have written some notes about 3 people that you wanted to talk to initially. Again, set yourself a date. I'm going to challenge you to put that as a February date, to have your first 3 conversations to start building your business case for Security Champions. So you've got a start and you've got an end, and it's just the bits in the middle now. So just as you're popping a few more questions into the chat, this is going to be continued. We've had a real sort of influx of people becoming interested in Champions programs. And at the first webinar we did on this, 2 things came up as next topics to cover. One was this one, how do we make the business case? And the second is much more about how do we maintain and mature our program. So your question that we answered very briefly about maintenance, we'll be going into in a lot more detail on our next webinar, which is going to be, which we just worked out just before the session, 22nd of March. So we'll send you an invite for that if you'd like to join, but pop the date in your diary, 22nd of March. We are going to go into some detail about the types of activities you can do to really engage and mature your champions. So now back to questions. Okay, I saw 2 more in there, but it was from Esther saying she had to drop off. So goodbye, Esther, you've probably already gone. Okay. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining. Or just as I said, that's another question's popped in. Will the next session be covering incentivizing security champions? Yes, absolutely. We're going to talk about skills, activities. We're going to be talking about reward schemes, formal and informal. So yes, we'll be covering that for sure. Thank you, Justine. Now, what usually happens is every time I say, okay, I think that's it, another question pops in, but at the moment, I think we're okay. So yeah, that just leaves me to say thank you so much for joining us. Follow us, keep in touch. Marilise and I are always kind of popping up bits and pieces around Security Champions, and and obviously we like talking about it as well. So if you've got any questions that you think of once we go offline, then just share them with us. But thank you so much for your time. Marilise, anything you want to finish off with?
I just want to say thank you to you, Sarah, because I think you're absolutely amazing in this space. I mean, your methodology that you've developed over the last few years and refined over the last few years and implemented with so many amazing clients, you know, it's really showing results. And so, yeah, just a massive well done. You're doing a great, amazing work in this space. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Now I'm embarrassed now, but thank you. And thank you to everybody for joining, and not only joining, but staying to the end of the session. Well done. Go and have some lunch.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.